Hey, good morning, good evening, good afternoon from wherever you are joining us. I hope you've had a smiling day so far, and I have two really good looking guests with me. We're going to make you smile more. Right. And today's session is of SecPod webcast is about banking security, and we are going to talk about some interesting facts, some interesting stuff, strategies that anybody in the banking security vertical can apply, but it's not limited. We have a lot to say here. Uh, with that, I have with me Alexander Blank. He's a global info security leader, influencer, LinkedIn influencer, and a researcher, and also an experienced advisor in compliance, various compliance regulations. And Rob Kelshaw, Global VP of Enterprise Sales at SecPod. Um, Alex and Rob, can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself before we jump into what's our agenda today?
I Thank you. I'm gonna take it this one, Rob, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
So happy to join you. You know, it's always a great opportunity for me when we share awareness, bring insightful information in any vertical. We're speaking about banks, but there are a lot of take information to take out and to enhance the situation. And you said I'm an influencer. Ooh, that sounds like really fake stuff, but I'm a practical guy coming from very technical world. I've been managing technical infrastructure, working in government and private sector for many years, and the goal here is to enhance the situation on the security posture of organization worldwide. And I think sharing, we can stop sharing and bringing awareness on this to help organization to know where to start and what to do and how to handle this from our experience, from what we see, and from the discussion we're gonna have with you, Rob. So I'm gonna let you on that. Oh, I didn't say, yeah, I was handling also a lot of incident response, so I know what it feels when you are destroyed by an attacker. So I know that you'd better fix that before it happens. Rob, to you now.
Thanks, Alex, and it's a pleasure to be joined by you today. I always feel like, obviously, we do these webinars to try and help educate and help people learn who are watching, but I always feel like I learn something from the guest speaker as well. So thank you so much for joining. But yeah, Rob Kelsall, Head of Sales here at SecPod. Always like to share my experience with customers over the past 20 years. I started off my career working in the banking sector, actually, at Merrill Lynch before I moved into the vendor space. And over the 20 years or so, I've worked with some of the largest banks across the globe on various different projects, not just vulnerability management, other security topics as well. And it's always a fun time. There are always challenges, but you always learn from the people that you work with, and you always pass on those learnings to other customers. And that's really the goal here: knowledge share. See if anybody who leaves this should be leaving with something they didn't know before they joined.
Oh, that's great. Lovely to have both of you here, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be an interesting discussion. Right. So, with that, today's agenda is going to be centered around, as we said, banking security, but we have other things to talk about. We're going to talk about trends, some of the latest trends, ongoing stuff in the banking industry, and something that things that info security teams could should not ignore. Then we're going to talk about FDIC regulation and recommendations for banks and how info security teams must prioritize these. We're going to also touch upon continuous vulnerability exposure management, which is pioneered by SecPod as a game-changing strategy in the vulnerability management space. And then we're going to have a quick Q&A session towards the end of the webinar. So before I give it to our speakers, I would like to remind everybody that a recorded version of this session is going to be available on our YouTube channel, on our Bright Talk channel, as well as on our website, secpod.com. And we are going to also send a copy of the session to your email so you can watch it later or share with your colleagues and friends. It's fun to watch. And we have something exciting for our audience today is anybody who's going to make it. I'm pretty sure Alex and Rob are going to rock it. If you add to that, if you add anything interesting to the discussion via your questions, we are going to send a copy of Effective Vulnerability Management book by Chris Hughes, and Rob's going to do that from us. He's offering that to the audience. So anybody who's going to ask an interesting question gets a copy of Effective Vulnerability Management by Chris Hughes. With that, Rob, it's up to over to you.
Thanks. And I think we've also got a poll running while we're chatting as well. So feel free to go ahead and check that out. Give us your thoughts and questions. And yeah, I'm not getting paid to promote that book, Jagster, but I did find it one of the most interesting books I've read on this topic, and I like to share the knowledge. So anybody who asks a question that we take up, we're going to send you a copy of that book. All right, so let's get started here. I think anybody who's working in the banking sector understands why they need to continuously evolve and improve their security processes, but where were we at today and what's changed? So, over the past 20 years, I hate to say not much has changed in the way that people tackle problems. That's a problem, and we'll talk about that, Alex. But what has changed from an attack perspective is the vast number of cyber attacks. I prepared a slide at a previous company back in 2015, and it talked about the volume of attacks and the types of attacks. And what was really interesting back then is that the majority of attacks or breaches, 99.9% or some crazy stat like that, involved a vulnerability, not a 0-day vulnerability or anything clever that caught them out, but a vulnerability that was over a year old. Right? This is crazy. People don't patch those vulnerabilities because they don't want to. It's because of the processes and procedures within the organization that need to evolve and mature. And if we fast forward from 2015 to today, what's changed? Nothing. It's still 99.9% involve a weakness or vulnerability that's really old, but it's the number of attacks, and there are various reasons which we'll talk about that have impacted that. But the number is not just going up. It's exponential in growth. And of course, the costs involved, crazy. I mean, obviously banks will obviously be interested in the dollar value, but I think what's more important is adding into that dollar value the brand damage, right, Alex? So, if your bank loses some data, how many customers are going to think twice about, continuing with that bank? So, the summary I want to kind of leave on this slide, guys, is the problem is increasing, but the way people tackle the problem hasn't changed, which is why we have to do something different, and the time is now to do that.
And Rob, I want to add that you were spot on saying, like, when there is an incident happening, the brand damage, it's always seen as a marketing standpoint or market share impact. But the fact as a consumer, if a big bank or a big credit organization is in the news for getting an incident and linking your data, there is also an emotional stuff in you that associate that brand to kind of failing to protect your data, and you cannot, as a consumer, trust it. So this is where it's critical to handle that and reduce the risk and impact, because otherwise the damage, want it or not, it's a human thing. You get it in your mind and you cannot forget about it. So, I mean, vulnerability is prevention, and that's way better than facing a big incident like we saw in the past. Also, I just want to add quickly that the environment evolved as well for banks. They switched from legacy systems. We remember AS400 that handled the bank transfer situation, but they also bring services to the end user customer, and they face digital transformation. We all want apps on our phone to manage the bank accounts. And it's also expanding the attack surface for them. So it's quite challenging, seeing that the patch and the vulnerable system are not actually patched, but at the same time we expand the attack surface and the digital footprint as well. So I mean, we can move on, but that's also why the thing is only growing in an exponential way.
Yeah, that's a great point there. I'm going to use that quote actually. It's only marketing until it happens to you, and then it's reality, right?
Yeah.
Good quote, thanks.
Yeah.
So yeah, why? I mean, why is there a rise in cyber attacks? So, people are obviously attacking organizations to make money. This is a well-funded industry, right? We're not talking about script kiddies just seeing if they can hack a bank for fun anymore. These are well-funded organizations that are there to make money. They'll be well-structured, well-organized, well-funded, well-educated. They'll be hiring people, with PhDs in cybersecurity to help them attack the next victim. And you've seen the amount of damage in the dollar value and how much money some of these organizations are making. So, crime does pay for these cyber attackers, and that's why the problem is increasing more and more. The other thing is just kind of like the economic changes, right? So people have adopted much broader ranges of technology recently. So, gone are the days where we can say, well, we've just got Windows laptops and mostly Windows servers. We just need something that can manage our vulnerabilities on those systems. No, not anymore. You've got any IP addressable device that's on your network now. It could have any operating system, no operating system, custom homegrown operating system. All of these IP addressable devices can have weaknesses. And most organizations didn't think about security when adding those technologies, i.e., we might do a survey to check that the vendor we're buying from has done their due diligence. But how secure is it really under the hood? What vulnerabilities exist that the vendor doesn't know about? But more importantly, what technologies do we have as a company to manage this new technology that we're bringing in? So inadvertently, organizations are trying to adapt to changes in economy, introduce new technologies, but failing to potentially understand the risks that they bring. And of course, the compliance and regulatory guys always want to make sure they're putting guidances and best practices and enforcing those where possible to help people focus. And I know this is an area of your expertise, Alex. So maybe you can give us some thoughts on the complexities this brings when it's supposed to be helping people be more secure.
I agree. I mean, you brought so many good points. First, there is the threat landscape evolution, which is a critical lever changing against the organization. I mean, we speak about transnational criminal organization, well-founded, and also state-sponsored attackers. So basically, this is not just script kiddies, as you said. It's very organized groups. And we have to realize that the goal is not always just stealing money. It's always, slowing down the economy. It's one country against another, one region against another. And there is a lot of leverage, a lot of geopolitical behind it. And want it or not, the vulnerability that we bring in our stack is exposing us to these attackers. It's not just local. I mean, the bank robbery is no longer a physical thing, like less likely nowadays, more like digital. So yeah, compliance and regulation. We have a great information at the FDIC, which is the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, which brings good recommendation for financial organizations, especially banks, in regard to managing the risks. What we see of the key thing is they try to bring transparency for organization, because as a customers of banks and partners of banks, the sooner we know an incident happen, the sooner we can take action again for defending ourselves against the threat. Because what attackers do is they gather information in incident and use that information to expand the attack to other targets. So one of the key aspects that we see, and this is applied, like the FDIC recommendations, say they have to notify about 30 days to any third party of an incident that did happen. And yet, if you think about that, 30 days, and we were speaking about the timely application of patch management. 30 days is a long time to be noticed about something that is exploiting even a known vulnerability. Because due to the regulation, this is a great thing because it brings a good baseline of security posture for organization. It's also unifying the attack surface between organizations. That means that all organizations kind of follow the same approach with the same patching and the same pace. And in the end, when an attacker gets a foothold in one organization, most likely the payload that was successful or the initial access that got successful in one attack is going to be replicated to the next target. So I think we must be proactive in that and a bit more awareness and more exchange of information between either victim organizations, so as they can enhance in a better way and more quickly and more efficient way in their organization posture. We speak about NIST because FDIC is relying a lot of NIST, National Institute of Technology, which is bringing the cybersecurity framework and all the good baseline for security that organization has to put in place. Again, these are baselines. Security framework are meant to be like a checklist or a roadmap to have the basics of the security. Yet, you must be aware of these trends that Rob spoke about. The evolution of the threat landscape must trigger an evolution of the way you manage your security and your patch management. The continuous evolution of threat requires a continuous patch management application on the infrastructure. I think, Rob, that makes sense. And the goal in the end, because we know we cannot remove the full possibility that we get hacked or we get an attack, but we can fight to reduce the impact and the likelihood of an incident. And if it happens, the early detection will be able to contain that attack in a small set that is properly segmented. And therefore, the impact is going to be minimal against like major breaches that we saw in the previous slide, which should never happen again, because obviously the evolution of the infrastructure will react toward these actual past events. Rob, if you want to take a strategic talk.
The crazy thing is they will happen again, Alex, and it's just a case of who will be the next organization that has a breach, right? And that's not something that I say as a throwaway comment. And as security professionals, it's our job to obviously help advise and secure these organizations. The other point that you mentioned there that I just find interesting is attack surface management, right? You see many companies, many security products that will just sell something that does attack surface management. What does this mean to people? It can mean so many different things. And I always just remember an example at a previous banking finance customer that I was working at with a different vendor, probably 15 years ago or more. And I was technical back then, and they were troubleshooting patch deployment on a Windows server for Microsoft Office. And I was like, whoa, hang on a minute. Why are you even patching Microsoft Office on a web server? Why does Microsoft Office need to be on there? Just take it off. And the guy looked at me as if I'd just come up with some magical new concept. Like, don't patch something if it shouldn't be there. This is probably the simplest example I can think of attack surface management, but a lot of people don't think about it, particularly, I always talk about siloing security and operations. Oftentimes you've got the security expert saying, here's a bunch of problems you need to go fix. You've got the IT operations person isn't necessarily well versed in security. They're just going to go fix something. Office has a vulnerability on a web server. Great, I'll patch it. That's it. Because of these silos, you're not working as efficiently and sharing knowledge across the different groups. Anyway, that's probably enough on that point. So moving on here, as I said, who will be the next breach, right? How will that breach be found and notified? And actually, I was going to talk about something different on this slide, but there's actually a great question that's just come in on the QA that I think is related. So the next person to get compromised, how are they going to find out that they've been compromised, and how are they going to report that, right? So the question was, and a free book coming to you if you posted this question, but what are the most sophisticated IOCs that you have found within a bank, and what resources have you found most helpful to identify mitigations for those? I think that's a great question, Alex. Maybe you can kick off with that.
Yeah, I mean, IOC stand for indicator of compromise, which is basically...
I assumed that as well. So
yeah, but
differently.
And that means that when you identify this information in your systems, it allows you first to confirm that the system is corrupted, and then it allows to analyze the extent of the impact of the attack and where it has been reaching system. So what to do with that is to understand what the threat actor have done, and to understand that, we can use the MITRE ATT&CK framework as well, because they are well documented, all the IOCs and all the threat actors and the groups. And most of the time, the IOC is like a signature of the attacker and lead you to first, probably the country of origin. And anyone can mimic an attack, but they all have like some very personal approach and attacks. And sometimes you can really connect the dots between the endpoint and understand the goal of the attacker, because they all work in that. Some are financially motivated, some are acting for political belief or stuff like that. And this can help you identifying where it is. But first of all, you ask the question, how do I know about that? You need a strong detection in place. You need visibility in the infrastructure. Visibility in the infrastructure is key, because if you speak about IOC, it's already late. I mean, indicator of compromise, like your system is compromised. So how do you know that? Ideally, you saw it because you had an alert on your detection systems. You didn't see it because it has appeared on the dark website or leak website, and someone from an IT company said, look, this company just leaked and got breached, and then you didn't know about it, And because this is happening, a lot of people posting, these guys have been breached, etc., which is not a good way to notify an organization that something happened as well. So I lost my thought about the question you asked. If you Rob, if you can remind.
That's okay. I think you answered the question. Maybe it's I won't say the last name, but maybe Curtis. If I didn't answer your question, you can feel free to expand on that. But I think about this slightly differently. If I'm an attacker, I don't want to leave an indicator of compromise. A well-designed attack is not going to leave a trail or a trace. It's going to be very difficult to detect. Obviously, back 20 years ago, we just relied on AV. There's something bad from a known bad signature, right? This was super easy to circumvent. Nowadays, we've got EDR technologies with behavioral analysis, looking at which processes are going off to which web addresses and data packets that are being transferred. So the way that we can identify the compromise with technologies that are available has become more sophisticated. But unfortunately, you're not fighting against that script kiddie anymore. You're fighting against somebody who's most likely paid a salary to design a sophisticated attack that doesn't leave a trail. It's not like a physical attack. I just had my car stolen. I knew I'd been compromised because my car was no longer on my driveway. It's a bit different if you're stealing data, right? You're not removing the data. You're just taking a copy of it and leaving no trace. So, there are, Curtis, lots of sophisticated technologies for EDR. My strongest belief has always been that prevention is better than detection, but you do need to kind of balance your resources on technologies in both spaces.
I agree. And also you brought something, about the attacker type that are very specialized. And, we've seen in the news, I think 2 years ago, that a group did hire a fake company of pen testing specialists. And these guys were officially hired to do the pen testing stuff. But this was actually a ransomware group in the back end that wanted the initial access into the target. And these guys were paid thinking they were doing a legal job. And in fact, they were actually providing the initial access to the threat actor. So it's very challenging to see that you have very, very advanced professional and skilled people. And we saw now there's a shift, in the market. The economy is slowing down a little bit, and a lot of people are seeking jobs. And we see a lot of scam jobs, the basics one on LinkedIn as well. And then a lot of jobs overseas. So you just meet people online, you don't know who they are. And you have to be careful because you might be hired by an organization which is actually backed by a criminal organization. The impact is that the professionalization of crime is happening. That means that the patch management, the vulnerability management, the overall security and attack surface management must be professionalized according to that shift in the attacker vector as well. So that was my intersection.
No, I think this is an interesting topic. But I think I was just thinking about movies while you were watching that, right? Attacks have now become so commonplace, well-funded, that, 20 years ago, you'd watch Mission Impossible or something, maybe 15 years ago, somebody would steal some data or hack a system with a USB key. You fast forward now, I just watched a movie I'd never heard of. It was called The Beekeeper on my last flight from Phoenix to the UK. In the Beekeeper, they actually have this ransomware group that has like an office location, and they're like millionaire playboys on yachts, and they've just got a team of people who are exploiting people and organizations, charities, banks for millions of dollars. And they see themselves as a company, as an organization. They don't necessarily see themselves as a criminal outfit. It's like in this Beekeeper movie, they had a whole call center set up, phoning people to try and steal data. It's not something that you just see in a movie. This stuff is real. It happens on a day-to-day basis. There's some compounding things here that really add to this problem, right? So we've spoken about the increase in the number of attacks, and there's an inability to manage that increased volume. We've also spoken about adding new technology into an organization and failing to think about how you're proactively going to secure that. We've spoken about compliance. Whether it's poor compliance enforcement or visibility doesn't really matter. Oftentimes the compliance checklist might be manual. But then, patching. Why do people not patch? There's a number of reasons here. It could be that they just don't have a technology that patches that type of technology. It could be that the patch is going to break something, so they decide that they're not going to patch it. But then they don't necessarily put in place other compensating controls. And I think one of the challenges here is that if you're a super large bank and you've got millions of dollars to throw at this, you could buy 4 different technologies to manage your vulnerability assessment, your risk management, your compliance management, your patch management, maybe 5 or 6 different technologies. But then you could spend millions of dollars more on integrating all of these things and putting a fantastic process around that. Smaller banks, smaller organizations don't necessarily have those funds, and it just becomes too complicated, not through a lack of intention to be secure, but just because the problem is too big and the technologies haven't been there to make this easy for people.
Yeah, you make great point. And also I want to add, sometimes about why organizations do not patch. There is the compliance side, and sometimes some are so frozen because sometimes the compliance is highly restrictive, and any change could break the compliance. And applying a patch can lever the fear of breaking compliance. So, because systems to be compliant with international bank transfer system must match certain versions. And if you change that, you might break the operational compliance, the requirement, and then they might just decide to leave it running vulnerable rather than patching. And as you said, you need to compensate this with security control that will actually fix the issue in another way. But that's not always integrated in the change management program. One of the key aspects, I think, in managing security, either in banks or other organizations, is to always have that security checkbox and question for each step of a change management process. The question should be, we change something, what's the impact on security? Initially, like from the ISO 27001 world, it's about the impact on the scope. You scope the security on the side, and you don't want to impact anything that impact the scope should be addressed, and the risk assessment will be reviewed, and the compensation measure as well. But overall, in any organization, if you add at any step of the evolution or the change management step that question about security, and then involve the communication, because you raised the silo issue between operation and security, well, actually having that question of security will bring them together and allow them to take the decision in more and better synchronization to keep the actual posture or even enhance it over time.
Yeah, absolutely correct. And the other thing that I always add to this type of slide or this type of topic is, in terms of challenges, is end user awareness, right? Oftentimes people won't patch because they don't want to disrupt people. So I don't want to deploy patches to a laptop user at any particular time of day or week because they might be doing something. Okay, they might be doing something, but it doesn't mean you shouldn't patch them. It doesn't mean you should let them suppress the update indefinitely, because guess what? if they're doing their online banking and their own online bank account gets attacked because they had several vulnerabilities in the Chrome browser they were using, that's going to cause a lot more disruption than having to restart their laptop one afternoon. Right?
Yeah.
So I think this kind of awareness that, IT operations, if they're left with the job of patching, they're not doing this to be disruptive. It's not that IT doesn't want you to get on with your job. They're doing this to help you be more secure. So, work with the end users to define a policy that's flexible yet gets the job done and makes you secure.
Yeah, they made in operation, like the James Bond of security, the permit to kill vulnerability from the top management, being backed to take decision when the risk is high enough. You patch it. It's gonna disrupt. Who cares? And then because CIA and confidentiality, integrity, availability. In the end, it's all about the confidentiality is key in the aspect. So if availability get a little impact, well, it's bad, but it's better than having full corruption. Yeah, let's move on. So, Rob, recommendation for risk management. That's a great baseline from the FDIC, Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. FDIC is US based, obviously, North America, but this is applying to any bank around the world because this is very unified. And these are 5 key steps and key pillars. I don't know, Rob, if you want to cover this one. If I was supposed to cover, I can't remember. You tell me.
I think this is your area of expertise, Alex. Go ahead.
Okay. So, we spoke earlier that we want continuous assessment and continuous enhancement of the posture of an organization. So basically, conducting regular risk assessment is key. And this is aligned with integrating the security side of things in the change management aspect. This is working together and responding to that need. Second point, compliance program. You must be compliant to access market, to operate on the market. Sometimes you need to be compliant because you don't want to be sued and you don't want to be charged for an issue of compliance. But sometimes it's also requested to be connected to a system. If you want to do transaction, you have to be compliant with the target systems as well and the other peers on the network, especially on the banking side of things. Establishing effective internal control system. When we speak about effective internal control system, it means 2 things. It means that it has to work. It has to serve what it has been designed for. And it is about reducing risks. But also effective means this is documented and this is formal and maintained. So we see a lot of organizations that do have control in place, but it's not documented. It's not integrated in the risk management side of things. But to be effective, it has to be well integrated, well communicated. And this way, when there is any change, where there is any decision to be taken, the impact is going to be more easy to analyze over the overall infrastructure. Using technology solutions, that's an obvious one. We want to use the evolving technology stack to be more efficient, to offload the basic tasks to the automation system. We speak about detection and response, detection of unpatched system. If you have to maintain manually an Excel sheet of system and version, it's not going to work. Today, you need to have a live view with dashboards of what needs to be patched with critical and risk analysis and risk rating, so you can focus on the more urgent systems and then go down, lower the risk. And finally, hire compliance expert. It doesn't have to be in-house. It's like, when you do a certification for ISO 27001, I speak about that because this is my field as well. When you do, you work on the readiness of the compliance of your organization, then you get external auditor. This is mandatory. The person that do the implementation of the controls and the program of security cannot be the person that audits. So you need compliance experts as well to help you on the different field of compliance that you require. And this is usually going to bring some nice roadmap. And I think this is a great value that we bring here, Rob. When I saw that slide, I was like, this is great. If you are watching this webinar, I suggest you take a snapshot of that stuff. I will do it. If you start, you are the security manager of an organization. You can take this and see if you did cover it all. If you are in the field for many years, obviously it's going to be, oh yeah, I did that, and that. But sometimes it's going to be a wake-up call that, oh, I forgot I had to do that. And when you have to do that, again, it has to be formal. It has to be documented, maintained, and communicated, revised, and maintained over years. So basically, every year you have to go through that. And is it still accurate? Is it still efficient? Because the decision you take, the patch management, the awareness training has to be updated according to the threat landscape evolution. As we saw, the amount of incident grow, the threat actor evolve, so as each step which remain relevant, but each action and control that you place in regards to each of these items must evolve according to the threats landscape evolution and the operational reality of your organization. Before, we had bank and we had ATMs, and that's it. We didn't have a mobile application. Today, we have mobile application that run on weak and unsafe customer devices. So basically, that means that the bank, which is responsible for protecting the integrity of the bank accounts, has to take in consideration the risk that the application is going to run on a corrupted device. So they put controls, like sometimes administrative controls, saying a license for the user that sign and agree that if their account is corrupted because the credential has been stolen, this is the user fault. So that can happen, and that's a security control that drop the responsibility of the bank, and that actually put them back in an acceptable risk level for the organization. Stuff like that, that has to be adjusted to the evolution of the tech stack, which is ever evolving because we are becoming digital. Digital transformation everywhere. Everything has to be instantaneous. That means that we have more and more connected system. That means that we need more and more control. That are meant to remain relevant for each and every system that you deploy on the system. I'm speaking about API, interconnection, mobility. Rob spoke about if you have an endpoint, a Windows machine locally, and you need to patch the laptop of someone in the network. That assuming that the laptop is available and in the network. But what happens if the laptop now is a roaming person? Like Rob, you're running from UK to US nonstop. How do they patch your machine? Now I know how they patch it, but that's not the kind of challenge that has to be considered and documented in the regulation part. And again, that's only a baseline. The regulation and compliance is a nice checklist to build on top, but that has to be adjusted to your reality. And Rob, you saw banks, you saw how it goes. I mean, maybe you have an example of what's the baseline and how it can be extended to something else that has not been technically described in that document.
Yeah, so I want to weave in another question here and come into this, Alex. So I'll just keep an eye on the questions here. So we do all of this, right? How do we evaluate the effectiveness of what we've done, right? And I'm going to add to that person's question and say, how do we make this more fun? How do we make it interesting, right? What are we doing? Because there's a lot of words on here. It's a bit of an eye chart. I think as you said, if you're a security professional, you might want to take a copy of this, print it out, and think about how you're handling each of the steps and in terms of your roadmap. But ultimately, the goal of everything here is to reduce weaknesses in a system and improve your overall IT risk posture. That's it, right? This is the goal. But how do you really measure that? So one of the things that we talk about here at SecPod is a cyber hygiene score, right? Based on all of these things, based on vulnerabilities, missing patches, security best practices, compliance standards, what does all of that mean? What is the risk of this system being breached? And what a score would we assign to that? And then organizations can kind of focus not on setting themselves a 30-day SLA to patch a critical vulnerability because it says you should in the compliance standard, but we're actually, what did that mean to us? What impact did that have? We improved our cybersecurity score from 70 to 80. We reduced the chances of being breached by Y. I think this is important just to summarize that last slide and your points there, Alex, and also manage to answer a question at the same time. And thanks for all the questions, people on the call. Please keep them coming, and we will try and weave them in. So at SecPod, and we won't get too much into a product pitch here, because obviously this is more thought leadership and gaining from Alex's experience here, but we believe cyber attack prevention starts with vulnerability management, or we used to call it advanced vulnerability management. What does this mean? Okay, well, ultimately, we're doing everything we can to prevent the attack before it gets to your EDR technology or your indicator of compromise technology that's going to tell you you've had a breach, right? So we want to close the door before the horse has bolted. That's our goal in everything that we do. And I'm going to tell the audience to forget about advanced vulnerability management or whatever that means to whichever vendor, but start to think about the first most important word is the word continuous in this CVEM chart. Anything that you're doing needs to be continuous and automated around identifying vulnerabilities and exposures or weaknesses in your environment. So continuous vulnerability and exposure management. This is a combined approach that will ensure you're doing everything that you can to prevent the attack from occurring in the first place. And Curtis, by the way, Alex, did confirm on the questions that you did answer his question previously, and he also concurred that being proactive is always better than being reactive. So thanks again, Curtis, there. That said, think about, you either need to have multiple tools to do this or one tool that's already integrated out of the box. It doesn't matter whichever approach you take. You need to ensure that you are identifying IP addressable devices, discovering devices on your network. You can't manage what you don't know. You need to ensure that you're, of course, identifying the attack surface and removing things that shouldn't be there. You need to identify known CVE vulnerabilities, but you also need to identify misconfigurations. You need to tie those in with your regulatory compliance standards, so you see which missing controls would also introduce risk into your environment. And then before you remediate, you need to take a risk prioritized view of all of these weaknesses. For example, if you're looking at a vulnerability for remote code execution in a browser, for example, is that more or less effective on system A versus system B? The risk could be different because of a compensating control. And that control could be, for example, a local admin account that doesn't have a password lockout policy. Obviously, system B, with the missing control for the password policy and the vulnerability in the browser, is going to introduce a much higher risk and needs addressing quicker than that vulnerability on a different system. And this is really important. We call it risk-based remediation. But then you need to make sure the remediation is there at your fingertips to assess the data in real time. You don't want a report that scanned a laptop when it was on the network a month ago, and the IT operations team is trying to throw a patch at a moving target while they're connected to Starbucks. You need to ensure that the remediation is fully integrated with continual reporting to close the loop. And this shouldn't be seen as a monthly activity. This should be seen as a continual activity. And again, back to the fantastic question, how do you measure all of this? Don't measure this based on how many days it took you to patch a vulnerability. What does that even mean? And I'll come back. I'll ask you that question again in a minute, Alex, but measure it based on what impact did your actions have on the overall security of your system. I'd like to just pose that back to you, Alex. What does all of this mean? How can we make sense of all of the data that we have?
Yeah, because also, I mean, from an operation perspective, it can be daunting. It hurts the motivation, seeing that it's an endless loop, because vulnerability appear all the time. And the thing is that it's about enhancing the posture and handling the bigger risk first, and then evolving the situation. So what's interesting is the amount of patch you applied. And when we speak about compensating vulnerability, it's not only vulnerability like system vulnerability. It's sometimes about configuration or misconfiguration, system hardening. Any step that you take is actually fixing the security side of things. And to quantify that, you're right. how much time did it take to apply? Well, it's just one click to apply vulnerability, and it depends when you do it. But the real thing is that how much you enhance the posture over time, how much vulnerability you did patch over time, and how much you enhance the posture of the organization. And sometimes the metric of how much you did and how much remain might lead some other strategical decisions, such as consolidating the IT stack as well to reduce the amount of system if you see that it's undoable to keep up with the amount of vulnerability in the infrastructure as well. So, and that's the continuous work that will give you an idea and some nice trend on where do you stand in your effort. Because you may patch in 1 hour, but if it's continuously like more and more expanding the surface and more vulnerability appear, you do not catch up and you won't. So you need to adjust your strategy as well. So, overall, how much the exposure grow, how much do we reduce it, and then what's the strategy to handle that? And maybe, sometimes it's about reducing the stack. Sometimes it's about segmenting the stack as well. Isolating some system in a lower risk environment, so as the risk is lowered by the isolation of the global system, and you don't have to focus on that as well. And that, the dashboard of the continuous patching, is going to help you decide on that and focus your action where it's actually more needed. So that's a way to do it. Otherwise, it's an endless rat race against vulnerability. It's endless. So, and doing that, when we split and regroup and isolate system by risks, and then while keeping the operational capabilities, obviously, you also make your work way more easy, and you allow the organization to place more investment where it matters, and maybe otherwise enhance the resilience over time of the organization, which is the role. And if there is an attack, an impact, or an incident, because you cannot avoid them all, with a proper optimization of the resource, you can also reduce the impact, and in the end, you're going to be more resilient, and the trust is going to be maintained even better. That will be it.
Yeah, absolutely correct, Alex. So, just to summarize this section, really, continuous vulnerability and exposure management, what is it? You need to automate discovery and assessment of all weaknesses in the system, not just CVE vulnerabilities. And you need to fully integrate risk-based remediation of those weaknesses in a continual manner. So this can't be a security team using some scanning technology, sending a PDF to the ops team to then go fix something in 30 days. And I urge everybody who's on the call, ask yourself, why do you patch? If the answer is because the security team says I have to patch in 30 days, this tells you have a problem in the process. And I say that with a smile, but I can tell you a lot of calls that I will ask why the people are interested in a new patch management tool. I will ask why they patch, and that is the answer I still get. I used to get it 20 years ago. I still get it now. And it shows me that there are simple things an organization can do to improve their processes around vulnerability management. There's another question here just before we come into the summary. I don't know the answer to this, Alex. You may or may not, but what certification resource do you feel is best to study if you want to specialize in vulnerability or risk management for FDIC or NCUA regulations, e.g. ISO, CISA, CRISC, etc.?
So the fun part is that not all of these frameworks lead to certification. Like only a few lead to certification. Like ISO can get you certified in ISO 27001 and some others. But as you saw in the FDIC, we said it at the beginning, this is based on NIST. NIST, so you got many recommendations, the cybersecurity framework, but NIST is also bringing controls for CMMC and all the US government-related entities. So therefore, certification resource to study, this is very aligned, and you have a lot of overlapping security control lists. I work in ISO, but I'm confident working in CMMC as well, or other federal compliance requirement to access the US market as well. So as long as you learn the best practices, and then you stay aware of the market, you will be able to bring the proper control and the operational capability to the organization without, keeping control relevant. It's not an easy one, to work about that, but work what your top market is. If you plan to work in North America, you know that NIST is going to be the driver. If you work in Europe, ISO is going to be the driver because this is a standard that is well more adopted in Europe. But in the end, it doesn't matter because there is a slight difference between the wording of the control and the way you apply them. But in the end, this is the same thing. So you have a lot of equivalence and you can always catch up. So I'd say focus where your job market is. North America, look at NIST, look at the CISA recommendation. If you are more in Europe, look at ISO, and also consider the privacy side of things because it work together. Europe has the GDPR, and that is spreading in Canada as well, and the US come more and more with that. And this is all, I speak about privacy as well because they come with the same way, with the security control, risk, compensation measure to reduce the risk, and bring the compliance as well. So it all work together. So if you are on one standard or on the other one, as long as you master it, you stay practical and stay aware, you will be able to answer the question for the other one. You don't know everything, but you get a lot of nice checklists for which you will be able to answer and guide you through that whenever it's requested. I hope that answered the question.
I think so. Hopefully it did. So we're about 50 minutes in. We want to just do a final check for questions and probably share the poll results as well. But just the summary here, and I'm gonna throw in another question here as I summarize because I like multitasking. The question was, what are some common misconceptions about vulnerability management? It says in banking, but I think my answer could be in any organization. I think a misconception is that you have to have two teams to manage vulnerabilities. You have to have a security team and an IT ops team, and those teams are separate. A misconception is that it's the IT ops team's responsibility to fix the problem and security's problem to identify the problem, right? Or responsibility to identify the problem. So the misconception is that there needs to be a silo. I don't think there does need to be a silo. I think there shouldn't be a silo. So, in summary, break down the silo is the number one thing you can do. To also weave in anything that you're doing in security needs to be communicated to your end users, right? Why are we doing things? We're doing things to make ourselves more secure. But then also measure how you've done things, not based on how quickly you fixed a problem, but on how you improved the overall security of the system over time, right? Is having a vulnerability on a server that's a year old acceptable? I don't know. It depends what other compensating controls are on the system. And unless you have a fully integrated solution to this problem that allows you to identify and assess both agent and agentless for systems that would support either in a continuous manner that covers not just CVEs, but all weaknesses in the system along with remediation. Unless you have a single solution that does that or multiple tools that are really well integrated, you are fighting a losing battle. So just think about how you can accomplish that with the time and the resources and the funding that you have. So unless you have anything to add to the summary, Alex, I think we move to questions or additional questions.
No, you made it right. I think there is a question saying, where was it? Oh, no, someone else. The answer of the question was done perfectly, so that's good. You were speaking, about. I like the way you speak about breaking the silo again. And the fun fact is that if we look at the FDIC requirement, they speak about effective risk assessment. So I think we cover it in the way we do it. But they say also, and that's why it may be misleading about the KPI they used about patch management. They say timely and accurate financial and operational and regulatory reports. But timely report doesn't mean like you have to time the patch management. It has to be efficient. It has to be documented. The reporting has to be timely, but the time of the patching or the MTTR kind of stuff, mean time to repair, is not as critical as well understanding what the risk related to the vulnerability in the overall system architecture. And another thing I want to add as well is, as the organization evolves and you do that continuous process, it allows you to better review the architecture and sometimes change the architecture toward a better way, as you realize that systems that are not as risky and do not require as much attention for patching because they are well isolated allow you to focus more on a more critical system. So you can shift the way you approach security when you have the good visibility and have a better focus and better effort on what you do and have better result over time.
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. And Jagso, I have a quick question for you, actually. So you may or may not have noticed, but Alex gave you a fantastic marketing tip early on in the presentation. So I know you recently designed some fantastic T-shirts for RSA. I know we're going to be giving those out at InfoSec next week. But did you pick up on the fantastic T-shirt opportunity with license to secure in some kind of a James Bond style?
That's right. We actually doing a lot of other creative ideas now. But we should have that one. I was actually thinking Avengers style more than James Bond. That would be nice, right? Different.
British. But if anyone watching, if you're at any event that SecPod's at, check out Jagso's T-shirts. This guy is super creative. We sold out, although they were free. I feel like we could have charged for them at RSA. We were just swamped with people buying these shirts.
By the way, we have one question. Maybe Rob, you can take that up, right? There's somebody asking, do you have on-prem solution?
So we're not getting into a product demo today. So if people do have questions of a technical nature, feel free to drop us those at info@secpod.com. Or if you want to see the technology, we'd love to arrange a one-on-one demo for you, or indeed trial the solution for yourself. But simple answer to that question is yes. We have a cloud SOC 2 certified solution as well as an on-premise option for customers.
So that's where you get to wear your sales hat, right? Finally. Nice discussion, both of you. Really interesting. Learned a lot. I learned a lot. I'm pretty sure audience learns a lot here, right? And then, by the way, Curtis here is inviting you already. So both of you are welcome to travel to Cincinnati. He's hosting you both, eh? but he has a request. He has a request. Yes, that's where I was coming to. He has a request. Rob, you should get the T-shirts with you.
Curtis, why don't you come to London next week?
Great discussion. To our audience, I would like to remind again, we will have a recorded version of this session available on our YouTube and Bright Talk channels, as well as on our website. And as Rob said, if you have any questions regarding our technology, feel free to send us a note at info@secpod.com, or feel free to visit our website, www.secpod.com. Alex, really enjoyed. Nice to have you here. Rob, fun as always.
Thank you. It was nice.
It's a pleasure.
Likewise.
Right. Thanks, everybody. Have a smiling day ahead.